Adam, that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to listen to. I'm guessing it was a lot of fun to do.
I had about 90 more questions, but we almost got through them.
Well, I think we probably could have sat here for a little while, but we do want to try to stay on schedule. So we need to wrap things up. And we've been here all day, really. I'm curious, we'd seen parts of this, some of it we'd seen in full, but we hadn't seen it laid out end to end. And we hadn't seen people's responses and the Q&A and the interaction. I'm curious here at the end of the day, after that experience, what you make of it. What stands out to you?
Well, I guess I was foreshadowing a little bit in that last question. Experimentation has just jumped out at me in so many of the conversations, right? We heard Nick and Sadal talk earlier about experimenting with different hybrid models and saying, hey, just try the 3-2 for 6 months and commit to giving it a chance and then gather data to find out what we should learn. We heard from Carol, right, that experimentation is at the very heart of having a growth mindset. We heard, with the 4-day work week, very much a similar message. Like, don't say that will never work here, or like we could never possibly get anything done in that amount of time. Run the experiment, test it. And I'm less concerned about which experiments we run than about the investment we make in building a learning culture and saying we've got to do more A/B tests. Because, Cade, what scares me so much about so much of leadership and management is every decision you make is an experiment where you didn't have a control group. You ran the A test, but you forgot there could have been a B, a C, a D, an E, an F, and we don't have those counterfactuals. And I think we should if we want to keep learning. What about you? What are you taking away?
Well, first, I want to comment on that because I think the question is, what do we need to push on in order to make that more acceptable? And I think you got to it with this idea that every decision is an experiment. Most managers don't think of it that way. I mean, almost nobody does. They think that's not an experiment. I have the right answer. And the rest of us are going, oh, maybe you have the right answer. We should just, what do we need to do to cultivate that experimental mindset? Because that's really what you're talking about.
It is. And I don't know, I've gotten pretty passionate about this idea that I wrote about in Think Again around encouraging people to think like a scientist, just to say, look, many of your strategies, your visions, even your assumptions, those are untested hypotheses, right? And you've got to run the experiment. And if you take what Andrea told us seriously, right, there are many different ways you could design that experiment. There are many different ways you can analyze the data. And so even if you're confident from your past experience that you're onto something good, it doesn't mean that there isn't something better waiting to be explored and analyzed.
I love that idea.
Wait a minute. I want to hear your reactions. What are you reflecting on? What jumped out at you?
I've been thinking about collaboration. The longer we've gone through the day, the theme for me has been around collaboration, because it feels to me like the individuals and the organizations who are really going to separate themselves going forward are those who can blend data and ideas and wisdom from very different sources. So, for example, with Andrea, she's talking about analytics and data, and she says, kind of, quite surprisingly for a data analyst, she says, data is not all data. It's imperfect. You have to add wisdom and alternative ways of looking at it in order to push it forward. And that, I think, is exactly right. But that's harder to do than to say. So, but there's connections to do other themes. One, we have all this new technology. I mean, really, as Nick and Sadal talked about, this technology facilitates, enables collaboration if we can make it healthy and if we can figure out how to reconfigure it for our organizations. But there's an enabling quality. Collaboration should be easier. But Adam, we know humans have a hard time collaborating across the aisle. It's easy for us to collaborate with people who are like us, but the advantage becomes adding information and wisdom and opinions from people who are not like us and data sources we haven't typically used. So we need all the wisdom from people like John and Mechi on how to do that. And so there's opportunity in collaboration. There's technology ready to enable it, but there are some personal challenges in pulling it off. And I feel like we got different perspectives on all of that over the course of the day.
Yeah, I found that interesting too. And one of the things that stuck out at me when John was talking was, how many people do I have in my life who go by they, them pronouns? Like when I met Andrea, right? Andrea was a she, and now an adjustment to say, like, okay, that's they, them. I'm not having to make that adjustment that often. And it makes me worry that I'm missing interaction with a significant part of the population that has been historically marginalized and not heard. I think there are so many different ways we could run that analysis. There's another layer that we didn't talk about really at all during the conference, except in passing, which is, I think empirically 7% of organizations in the analysis that I've seen, I think this is Fortune 500 companies, even include disability in their discussion of diversity and inclusion. Not even on the radar, 93% of companies, which I think is a serious problem given how pervasive disability is. And so one of the things I'm trying to figure out right now is how do we, of all the ways that we may gravitate toward people who are similar with us and are similar to us and collaborate with people who look like us and think like us, how do we identify the dimensions of diversity that are most missing from our interactions and pull those people in to get ourselves out of the mode of groupthink?
Well, it's a good question. I can tell you, I think you know this from our work on this conference over the years, good intentions aren't enough. Awareness isn't enough. Buy-in isn't enough because we're so deeply grooved into the way we think and the people we know in our network. Push comes to shove, you automatically go back to the same things. The corrections that I found are effective are having those people around you. You've got to give people authority. You've got to bring them into your life, and then you have to listen to them, and they need to be different from you. We're on the right page. We're facing in the right direction, but we're still going to make those mistakes. So unless I have people around me reminding me, giving me alternative suggestions, and it's not comfortable. It's very connected to the uncomfortable aspect we've been talking about today. You're going to stay in that same groove no matter how well considered and well intended you are.
Yeah,
right,
I guess
Adam.
I want to ask you one other question, which is, it seems like we've been sort of wrestling with two competing goals throughout the day. One is, how do we embrace discomfort? The other is, how do we maintain effectiveness and well-being in spite of that discomfort? And I don't have any answers to that, but I think it's a question we should all be grappling with.
Well, we got to work on parallel tracks. And the idea isn't that, well, just go all this other way, but maybe we need to go more that way than we have historically. And maybe we need to run more experiments than we have historically. And maybe we need to downplay experience on the resume more than we have historically. We don't know exactly how far to go. We just need to know that we know the direction we need to lean.